Welcome to WP-Tonic, episode 154. And today we've got Nate Wright. Nate, introduce yourself to the listeners. Who are you and what do you do?
Hi guys, I'm Nate Wright. I run Theme of the Crop, which is a small WordPress themes and plugin shop specifically for restaurants. So I've got a kind of suite of free and commercial plugins, and then some themes that are kind of built on that plugin functionality for reservations, menus, local SEO, that kind of thing.
Excellent. I also want to introduce my co-host, Jonathan. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Oh, hi there, folks. I'm the founder of WP-Tonic. We're a WordPress support maintenance company, and we offer a number of different services for different sectors.
Awesome. And I am John Locke. My business is Lockdown Design, and I serve blue-collar industries, specifically with local SEO, custom WooCommerce development, and WordPress development. Jumping right into it, I want to ask you, Nate, I love to ask everybody, what's their origin story? How'd you get to where you are right now? What your journey looked like?
Oh, there are a lot of different places that could go. I'll try and keep it fairly brief. I mean, I started back in kind of the mid to late 90s doing HTML for the first time, mostly through my brother. My brother was a big kind of CGI Perl programmer, and he was learning and doing a lot of stuff. And I was like, oh, I want to make a website for my band. So he showed me how to make a website for my band. And then I built a website for StarCraft. And then, it's kind of that teenage hobbyist. You have so much time to spend that you can kind of just play around with these things. And so over time that kind of developed, and I started working for my brother part-time, doing a lot of little things. Some of it was just content management, but then over time he'd give me little programming jobs and I picked stuff up here and there and did a lot of work that way. And then I always kind of pursued client work as a way to just fund whatever other thing I was doing in my life. I've been activist, I've been a journalist, but when I moved to Edinburgh about 4 years ago, I started kind of seeing it as a career, the web development thing. And that's when I started really investing in WordPress, not just as something I use to build somebody a site with every now and then, but as a platform that I know and develop on full time.
Very good, very good. How is the web scene there in Edinburgh?
I think it's really good, actually. We've got, there's a pretty good tech community in general, not necessarily WordPress specific. We've got FanDuel, if you know FanDuel, they're a big startup.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they're based here, as well as Skyscanner, which is a kind of flights, hotels, reservations search startup. They're the kind of two big ones. In fact, the WordCamp we had in Edinburgh 2 years ago was hosted in Skyscanner offices, which they donated to us for that event, which was pretty cool. So yeah, I think, Edinburgh is it's never going to be a London or a New York or certainly not a Silicon Valley or anything, but it's got a lot going on for it, I think. And in the WordPress space in particular, we've got a pretty cool group of users, developers, bloggers, and some quite advanced developers as well, who come to the meetups and talk stuff. So I quite like the city's sort of tech community, and find everybody's quite friendly. I think there isn't a whole lot of competition, which is nice.
Very, very good. And you serve specifically, you make products for the restaurant industry, like themes and plugins. And when I was younger, back in the early 90s, late 80s, I worked in restaurants. Obviously, like, the internet wasn't a thing back then, but I know the restaurants have like tight margins. The difference between profit and loss is not a whole lot. What is happening now? Like, are restaurants like valuing web marketing, online marketing now more than they did in the past?
Well, I mean, I don't have a really long history, so I can't say definitively like yes, more now than before. I think it's less like you can't really ignore it it's very rare that I come across a restaurant that doesn't at least have a Facebook page. And actually, for a lot of restaurants, I think having a presence on Facebook, Twitter, Urban Spoon, any of these sorts of social media is a great first step if they can't afford a website. To have a kind of presence online, like for a lot of website or restaurants, it's enough for me to be able to find their Facebook page when I search for them, because all I really want to know is their address or their phone number or their opening hours or something like that. But I think there's definitely a lot of restaurants that are taking sort of digital marketing very seriously. They're making use of email newsletters to drum up support for special events. There are a lot of, one of my plugins is for taking reservations online. And so, the Open Table service has gotten very popular in the US. In the UK, Res Diary is quite popular. And there's a whole bunch of other services built around that sort of feature set that a lot of restaurants are now taking advantage of, but at quite a high cost to them. As you said, their margins are really small, and sometimes the Open Table booking fee can be $1 or $2 a booking. And so those costs can really add up. So I definitely find a lot of restaurants now, I think a lot of restaurants would be perfectly happy to not exist, for TripAdvisor to not exist, for any of that stuff to not exist, because it's a bit of an overhead for them, or at least that's how they feel it. But then there's a whole bunch of restaurants who are sort of recognizing the value and investing in that as well. I wouldn't say they're necessarily investing huge sums, because as you say, they don't have huge sums to just dump into big projects. But definitely for more and more of them, it's a pretty important part of their overall marketing strategy.
Can I ask something, Nat?
Yeah.
Knowing this type of business, I think one of the other, which is probably out of your scope, but I'm interested in asking you this question to see your opinion. I think the other thing is, have you noticed their ability to actually use the website effectively, to keep on putting new content on it and actually driving traffic, and which will affect your business because it will affect dropout. How do you try to educate and help them build it as a real resource for their business, if you understand what I mean?
Yeah, I suspect you're talking to some extent about content marketing and kind of customer engagement over time and stuff. To be honest, I don't think that I've ever seen a restaurant effectively use content marketing. I think it's a real high investment strategy. And I don't know, well, okay, actually, I do have a customer who their restaurant has quite a famous sommelier. And so they have turned their blog into essentially like the sommelier talking about his new wines and things like that. So that's quite an interesting way to use that. But to me, I have not seen that in use very much. And I think not a lot of restaurants would have either the expertise or the competence to do that well.
I totally agree. I meant really more, that they do update prices, that they keep on using it, because if they don't keep using it, they'll probably stop paying for it. So have you learned any systems or tricks of keeping them so they keep on using it, or is it,
Yeah, well, because I do product work, I often don't have as intimate a relationship as I would if I were doing the client work. So in that sense, a lot of my information is kind of secondhand. So oftentimes I'm dealing with a middleman of some sort who is contracted to do their tech work. I do work directly with a bunch of them, but I would say it's not the majority of my customer base. But I mean, I can see that that's happening in all sorts of other ways. So, one of the things I just improved in my restaurant menu plugin is I made it possible to update the prices from the quick edit menu. And that's a request I've gotten for years. And that suggests that people really are going in and updating prices regularly. And I'm constantly getting requests around kind of unique menu needs. So I've got this lunch menu, but then I've got this special event on every Thursday, and I need a special menu just for that, and that sort of stuff, which suggests that they're not just kind of firing and forgetting on these websites, that they're making active use of them. But how many of them are doing that? Percentage of restaurants are really actively investing in that? I would guess it's still pretty low. That would be my guess.
Yeah, I apologise because thinking back to your interview a while ago on the Matt report, your model. I think you directly sell to some restaurants, but you sell a lot of the product to other developers, don't you? Which is a good strategy, I feel. Sorry, John, I interrupted there. I went on a tangent, did I, John?
Oh no, take it. I'll tag you in.
Right.
Go.
But do you feel, just to finish off, and then we'll let John answer his next question, do you think that's been a really good choice that you develop the company and a lot of your product you're selling to other developers as a kind of framework? Would it be right it's a kind of framework for developers to build restaurant sites quickly? Would that be kind of your strategy? And it sounds like it's been a pretty successful one.
Yeah, I think what exactly my strategy is part of the problem around sort of the ambiguity of what I'm doing, because there is the kind of service model that targets specifically a restaurant owner or somebody with very, very little experience. That would be something like Happy Tables or Restaurant Engine, that basically provides you a hosted platform with extremely simple setup. And that's not really what I do, largely because I don't want to be in the hosting industry. I like being in the product space because it allows me a certain amount of distance, which means I can take holidays without worrying about a client site going down or things like that. But as you say, it creates this issue because I end up selling largely to developers. So I build everything for people who are not developers. I want a restaurant owner to be able to come in, put up one of my themes, activate my plugins, and set it all up without being overwhelmed with the complexity of it, without necessarily putting into their hands decisions that shouldn't be in their hands, like putting simple systems in so that when they put their address in, I make sure it shows up in a useful spot on the site. I don't make them make that choice about where it appears and why or any of that sort of stuff. But I've found it very difficult to market to restaurant owners and managers themselves. I have some of my best relationships with those customers, but they're very much a minority of my overall customer base. And I think that just comes down to the ease with which you can reach out to people who are already developing in the WordPress space. There's a massive ecosystem of developers and implementers who are already on the lookout for plugins and themes. And it's much easier to tap into that audience and sell to them than it is to take a restaurant owner and say, there's this thing called WordPress. You have to set it up, but I'll give you the themes and plugins to run it. I think WordPress is just a little bit too hard to get going on your own for that specifically, which is why I end up with this developer relationship most of the time, I think.
No, I think that's really intriguing. And I love that you brought up, like, there's kind of a dichotomy there, because you're making products for restaurant owners, but they're really not the ones purchasing your product. The ones purchasing your product are more the site builders, the people who are marketing the restaurant sites, the WordPress developers who are actually going in and creating the sites. And I want to like take each half of that discussion, but let's keep the momentum going on what you were talking about. Like you build the relationships like with the WordPress developers, and standing out in the crowd. On one side, you've got Theme Forest and Envato, which everybody goes to and they get the traffic. And then on the other side, you've got software as a service products like Happy Tables and Restaurant Engine, and you're trying to get in where you fit in. How is it like marketing your product without the power of Envato behind you? as an independent theme shop, plugin shop owner?
Without a doubt, it's the hardest part for me personally. I mean, because I come from a coding background, like for me, building the stuff is the easy. I mean, it takes work, but I know how to do it. I know what I'm trying to get to, and I can envision the final result and get there. With marketing, it's a lot of trial and error, and to be honest, for me, mostly error. It's taken a long time. I would say the successful marketing channels for me have been the WordPress.org plugin directory. My free plugins there are a very good or easy. It's a simple way to get eyeballs because I have a reservations plugin. It's got 10,000 active users. That's like a ready-made audience for me. And obviously it took work to build that up over several years, but I didn't have to go out and buy ads for that. I didn't have to give out affiliate commissions to get listed on sites. I mostly just had to put it there where people were already looking. And I think that's the appeal of an Envato route as well. If you were going to go with a theme shop, for instance, is you get to build your product and put it where there's a whole bunch of eyeballs. But actually getting them in, especially with like kind of an unsexy product like restaurants. I mean, at least in the developer world, there's a lot of really interesting things going on, which are either solving complex developer problems or serving kind of more kind of appealing or high impact niches. And restaurants is kind of just to be honest, the restaurant website's pretty simple. Like you give them a few photos, you give them a menu, you give them your opening hours, your address, your phone number, and you're pretty much set. Like there's definitely more you can do with it, and in terms of integrating your website and lead captures and maintaining relationships. But the thrust of it is not very sexy, and that's made it really hard to go out into the WordPress space and say, I've got these cool products, and everybody's like, oh, I've seen restaurants before. I've seen that done. There's nothing new about that. So yeah, it's hard. It's been hard.
One thing that I really respect about Theme of the Crop that I don't see a lot of on Envato though, is you actually just include the features that are needed for a restaurant site to succeed instead of trying to bundle everything in the kitchen sink plus some. Talk a little bit about that, making the decisions of like what to, put into your products and how they all fit together as opposed to some of the other, perhaps like restaurant themes or solutions out there.
Okay, I'll start with like how they fit together. Because I think that's the thing I have trouble selling a customer on when they land on my website. But so I've got a plugin for restaurant reservations, a plugin for restaurant menus, and both of those things involve aspects which appear on the customer-facing website. You've got a booking form for reservations, and you've got a menu. So the free plugins, they provide the kind of base styles that make it functional for any theme. And they look okay, but obviously when you buy a theme, you buy a theme because you think it looks great. So you buy a theme and then you plug in some other plugin to it, and that plugin doesn't look as good because the themer never bothered to style that plugin styles, which makes sense. I mean, there's no way a themer can include styles for every single plugin out there. And if they did, you just have a bloated website style sheet. So basically what I do is I have each of these feature plugins. So there's reservations, there's menus, a simple plugin for adding sort of testimonials, and then the one that's specifically for displaying your business profile. So address, opening hours, phone number, map. And so all this functionality lives in these plugins. But then when I build a theme, I'm deliberately building a theme to display that content. So the theme is essentially a style which works to integrate all these different feature sets into what I hope is a kind of compelling restaurant website design. It might mean that one theme is really pushing customers to the booking form. Another theme might have, a very particular way of displaying a menu, for instance. Like this theme might be great for short menus. This theme might be great for long menus, that kind of thing. So when I talk about sort of the whole product suite, it's really about taking this idea of all these discrete components that have been built and pulling them together into one cohesive product where everything works together implicitly. So for instance, my business profile plugin uses schema.org markup to tell Google about rich data about your business. So if you've ever searched for a local business or a restaurant in Google, you've probably seen that little info panel that appears on the right of the search results. And that'll show a map, it'll show the name, opening hours,
Yes.
phone number, also show a link to reservations for restaurants. So if you're using my reservations plugin and my business profile plugin, it will include the schema markup for the reservations. And the same with my menu. It actually allows you, if you have a restaurant schema object, it'll allow you to define a link for the menu so that when someone searches for your restaurant, they'll see not just your name and opening hours, but they can get a direct link to bookings and menus. So that's just one way in which like these pieces all kind of fit together, and they're more valuable when they're used together rather than just as standalone things. That last part of your question about how they all fit together. But the previous one was like, how did I end up going that route rather than the kind of, let me just give you one product that has everything. Because I come from a developer background, so I have wrestled with and cried over bloated plugins for many years. And it's not the kind of product that I would want to buy. And so it's not the kind of product that I want to build. As a developer, you learn that bugs sort of multiply exponentially as complexity grows. So if you have two pieces of something complex and you say add two options to each one, you end up with like 4 times as many potential scenarios of different option configurations. And so when you get a theme that is bundled hundreds and hundreds of options into its platform, essentially what you have is a system that cannot be properly tested across all variations. Obviously, you could automate some testing, but automated tests only do so much. So the more sort of heavyweight something gets with more options and things like that, the more scope there is for things to interact poorly, for things to not display properly, and for more things to creep in that you haven't really noticed. So for me as a developer, keeping things very simple and very isolated in that sense, like this plugin does this one thing and it's not going to do loads of other things. It might integrate with this other plugin in an interesting way, but it'll only ever do so through a kind of explicitly defined system rather than just through a whole bunch of options and things. So that was really what drove me to the model of saying, I'm going to keep things as simple as possible, because on the one hand, it leads to better products. The end user has fewer problems with it, but also in my own interest, it leads to fewer support requests. And that's been a huge factor for me, is how do I do all this stuff but minimize the amount of tech support I'm going to have to provide? Because I don't want to be debugging hundreds and hundreds of people's websites all the time. I couldn't really do that on the kind of profit model that I have. And most of the people who succeed at that with the big complex themes on Envato, they're able to do so because they're able to hire low-cost support technicians in developing countries, which is a great model for them, but it's not the model that I want. It's not the kind of business I'm interested in running at all. Yeah.
No, it sounds like you've got a win-win situation there. We're going to go ahead and head to our first break, And when we come back, we're going to be talking more with Nate Wright of Theme of the Crop. See you in a minute. We're coming back from our break, and we're talking with Nate Wright of Theme of the Crop. You know, before we were talking about like development, but you know, what are the common mistakes that you see restaurant sites like making out there right now? You know, I know you talked about it before. You know, restaurant sites having inverted priorities. Can you talk about that for a second?
Yeah, I mean, the one that I bang on about all the time is bad photos. It just, you should not, if you've taken a photo, even if you have a nice camera, if you don't know how to take a photo of food or a photo of an interior, I mean, these are specialized photography skills, your place is going to look pretty bad. So the one thing I tell people, which is not with any of my products, is if you have money to spend on a really expensive web developer or a really expensive photographer, pick the photographer, because you can put good photos in a bad website, and that's probably better for you than bad photos in like a super fancy website. So that's like the first one. It's kind of doesn't even have anything to do with WordPress. Just pay somebody to take good photos of your place. It'll be worth it. But in terms of the actual website content and stuff, and it's not unique to restaurants, but people focus on the things they can see. So there's a huge interest in having a restaurant website that looks like something fancy, or you want, you know, fancy scroll effects or lots of animations, or, you know, you end up focusing on all the kind of visual ways you might impress somebody, not necessarily through good photography, but through, say, fancy layouts or things like that. Most restaurants, or at least most visitors to restaurant websites, are pretty utilitarian. I think they're out walking on the street, they're on their phone, and they're looking for somewhere nearby that they want to eat at, or they already have heard of this place and they're just trying to figure out, is it open now, or can I make a booking, or things like that. And there's often not very clear priorities for actually getting users through that conversion funnel as quick as possible. I mean, I think there's a lot of visitors that a restaurant website can take immediately to a conversion funnel that they don't. And particularly if you're on a phone and you're looking at 4 or 5 restaurants, you're probably going to end up booking the one that loads first, because you're probably on some bad Wi-Fi or on the 3G network, and you're sick of waiting for all these sites to load. So that's another kind of big one, is there's a kind of over focus on what people can see and not nearly enough focus on how you can actually take a visitor from landing on your site to phoning you up or making a booking as quickly as possible. And yeah, I mean, the others which touch on it is there tends to be a lot of, I mean, with any web project, anybody who's dealt with a client knows there's a lot of ego design that goes into the project. It's something that has to represent something very unique and personal to whoever the owner or the person commissioning the project identifies with. And yeah, I see that just kind of folding into that focus on what can be seen versus what cannot be seen. So you'll very rarely see a restaurant that has good SEO, for instance, even though that's probably 10 times more valuable than whether the logo is on the left or the right, for instance. So yeah, that kind of inverted priorities where they aren't really thinking about the business function of the website. And to be honest, I think it's often not the website owner. It's often this middle who is implementing a WordPress website for a client, often using tools that they have limited understanding of, so they can't necessarily take the best advantage of them. And they're kind of imitating what they see other websites do without really thinking about what does this website actually, what does this restaurant need to actually turn a profit on this thing. I mean, I'm really surprised at how this profile plugin is, because I mean, it's not just for restaurants, but almost any local business could benefit greatly from having that kind of schema markup. But it's just not something that I see a lot of web developers putting time into.
Yeah, I've got a question. You know, you've been in business now for a few years and you've been building this up. So what's the vision for 2017? You know, are you happy to keep the business? Now, I don't know if you do most of this yourself and you use subcontractors, or you've got a small team that you directly employ. And I don't know if you're happy to keep it at this level, or you want to grow the business some more this year and the next couple of years. So what's the plan?
Yeah, I don't have really ambitious growth plans. I do it entirely myself. I occasionally will subtract some design work. I recently redid my website and had a couple of people I know who would trust around SEO stuff who helped me work out some kinks on that front. But for the most part, I build the stuff and sell the stuff myself, and I'm not terribly interested in hiring other people. So there's still lots of room, I think, for me to grow. At the moment, it really only funds me half time. I work half time for the Public Knowledge Project in Vancouver. But so I'd like to see it grow. I think there's still lots of room for it to grow, but I don't have really ambitious plans for, say, launching a software as like a hosted platform. I don't have really ambitious plans about restructuring what I'm selling and why, or who I'm targeting. And that may be short-sighted. Like, I don't want to
not
offer
at all.
that
Actually, I think you're being very. I'm trying to find the right word here. I think you're being a little bit unfair to yourself. You know, utilizing the wrong language, really, because I think what you're describing is that you are very happy. What I feel that you're saying is that you're happy, you want more sales, but where the business is at the present moment, you're totally happy with the actual structure and the size of the business. That's what you're looking for.
Yeah, and I'm really happy with the products that I'm selling, and that matters a lot to me. I mean, I'm sure it matters to everybody who sells products, but I'm really happy with where I'm at with the plugins. I mean, of course, I've got lots of ideas for new developments and things like that, but I'm really proud of what I've built, and I've been able to do that because I haven't really rushed forward and just spun out a whole bunch of stuff. I've really spent my time and tried to do things in a way that I really like, and that means that as I go forward, I don't have a lot of stuff where I feel like, oh, I've got to go back and redo that whole thing. So yeah, I mean, I'd love to have like right now I've got 4 themes for sale. You'd think I'd know that. I'd love to have 10 to 15 themes, because the biggest sort of, in terms of offering that complete package, the biggest bottleneck right now is, you know, if one of my 3 themes doesn't fit your restaurant's brand, then you're kind of, you know, you got to go elsewhere.
I think that you pointed out something really interesting, and what I was going to ask you is, have you considered to open it out to third-party developers? So it's something that when we had the team from Beaver Builder, that's helped them enormously, is the power of the community that they've built around their plugin. Is that something you might be interested in, is build more of a community around your business and allow third-party developers to kind of help you basically grow the business?
Yes and no. So when I started, I was very influenced by the Easy Digital Downloads team, Pippin and company. I think they've got a fantastic little ecosystem. I mean, little ecosystem. It's a pretty successful ecosystem. And that's part of the reason why I base plugin, add-on plugin model to the products that I built, rather than just doing a kind of free pro or any of that sort of stuff. And I think at the time my vision was to hopefully end up somewhere where there is an ecosystem and I wasn't the only add-on builder and that sort of thing. But time has passed. I think I've gotten maybe just a little bit more guarded over my brand, and a little bit more nervous about what it would mean to open up and sell other people's products on my site that I couldn't really guarantee the quality of. One of the things that I'm really proud of is the support I provide. I think I provide very good support. It's part of the reason my products tend to be higher priced than other people's products. And I think it would be very difficult to support a product that I didn't build, or at least that I didn't know quite intimately. So yeah, I think over time I've become more and more hesitant to do that. Now, I will say that there are several themers out there who have built on my plugins, and I work with them to help them make sure that those integrations are as good as they can be. I happily recommend them to people and stuff, but moving to the stage where I would sell them on my site, I think I'm just a little bit gun shy on that front. And I think there's probably lots of scope for.
Well, I think the reality is what you've outlined is totally true, but it's like most scenarios, isn't it? You know, it's not going to be perfect, but there could be also benefits, but there are drawbacks as well. And what every business owner has to make a judgment call. And with the benefits, there will be problems. And it just really depends on your psyche, where you want to take the business. Do you really want to go down the road? And I feel by your answer is, what you're saying is it's something that at the present moment you won't be very happy with, but you're not totally blanking it off. It's just where you are at the present moment. Would that be right?
Yeah, and my ideal world is that I have a close relationship with one or two developers who I trust really well, and I spin off something like theme development to them, and I trust them to build solid themes, to build to my own personal standards of quality, of the ease of user experience. That's a whole side of the business that, like, there are lots of really talented designers and developers who I think I could, like, that kind of relationship would work really, really well, a kind of profit share around that, as long as I could kind of structure some of the code to make sure that what I was committing to selling and supporting met my standards. But to be honest, I don't think I do enough volume in themes to make it worth another developer's time at the moment. Themes are a little bit of a long-term investment for me. I mean, even themes that I built 2-3 years ago are still selling. It's not the Envato model of you put out a theme and you have the kind of massive theme sales, and then after a few months it drops off, and then there's just almost nothing forever. Mine typically take a little while to build up, but then kind of plateau. And they don't require a lot of, they're actually tend to require less support, and that's because I know that the integrations with the plugins are rock solid, so they don't run into those kinds of issues. And they are also the most high value. So I sell like a theme plus all of my free plugins I sell for $129. So that's a pretty high value customer for me. So I necessarily promise, I couldn't ask a developer to build me a theme and then promise him X amount of money, because my highest selling theme sells maybe 10 times as much as my lowest selling theme. So it's quite variable, and it's really difficult to kind of, but I'd love to find somebody who I could work with in that kind of way, and find ways to do specific things without necessarily turning it into an open market, if you know what I mean.
Oh yeah, I'm sure there's a middle way. Actually, it just needs a lot of thought, and you've got to be comfortable where it's your business. You've got to be comfortable with it, haven't you? But I'm sure you'll find a path. Got a final question, John, before we wrap up the podcast and go on to the bonus content, John?
Yeah, definitely. So as far as like where you're taking like development with your themes and with your plugins, do you listen to like, do you get a lot of feedback from the WordPress site builders that purchase your products, or do you get any from restaurant owners themselves, or where does your feedback come from when it goes into developing like your next product or improving existing ones?
Yeah, most of it is what comes to me. So I don't go out and actively seek it too much. I would say there's two main channels. Well, for both of the sort of customer buckets that you outlined. So I get really sustained, like detailed discussions with really involved restaurant owners and people who are working in the restaurant marketing industry specifically. So maybe a PR agency or something that specializes in restaurants. And I get amazing detailed feedback from them because they're super invested in this. So it runs everything from kind of like overload of feature requests to really, really useful intelligence about how people are actually making use of the reservations, for instance. What are the key tools that will make things faster or speed, like give them productivity gains or help them remarket? I get that kind of stuff from those people, which is really helpful. Although I think that they're very much a minority. Like they're very much the ones they give lots of feedback, but they are a minority of my customers. Although they are the repeat customers, I tend to get the repeat sales from them. From the web builders, I get lots of feedback, particularly through my free plugins. I mean, it's a great way to have exposure to way more people than I have in my actual customer base. My user base is probably 10 times as large as my customer base. So I get lots of really useful but sporadic feedback from them about features they need, things, pain points, that sort of thing. But their feedback tends to be in either the usability of the software or in some kind of option or feature set that they needed to implement this project right now that they couldn't find. And it's sometimes hard to figure out from that what are the really critical things that I want to support and what are the things that I'm just going to tell them hire a coder for that. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, with that, we're going to wrap up the regular part of the podcast. I want to remind everyone that if you're getting value from this podcast, interviews, and the roundtable shows on Saturday, be sure to go to iTunes and leave us a detailed review. We're trying to get to triple digits, and we're getting a little bit closer each week, but go ahead and help us out there. And with that, Nate, how do we get a hold of you?
Yeah, you can contact me personally on Twitter at NateWR, or the Theme of the Crops account is at Theme of the Crop. Theme of the Crop's also on Facebook. It's just facebook.com/Theme of the Crop. And of course, there's themeofthecrop.com. I've got a contact form on there, and I reply to everything. It just comes to me. There's no support middleman. So I'd love to chat to people about whatever their needs are for restaurants. So just reach out.
Excellent. Jonathan, how do we get a hold of you?
Oh, before that, folks, I just want to emphasize what my great co-host said about giving us a review on iTunes, but also subscribe to our YouTube channel. We've got a lot of content. I plan to do some training videos on there as well in the new year. So there'll be hopefully new materials. I'm going to broaden out what I discuss on my part of the YouTube channel. I'll probably be dealing with Facebook and other marketing things that take my interest. That's our plan, isn't it, John?
That is the plan.
And the way you can get hold of me, folks, is quite easily. Get me on Twitter at Jonathan Denwood. I'm normally remarking and causing some mischief on there every day. Or you can email me at jonathan@wp-tonic.com. They're the two easiest ways, folks.
Excellent. And you can get a hold of me at my website, which is lockdowndesign.com. You can follow me on Twitter, lockdown_ if you dare. And you can find me on Facebook, just Facebook/lockdowndesign, all one word.
What's this dairy business about, John?
I don't know, man. Some people, you know, I don't know. If you dare, you follow me on Twitter. I don't know.
This, folks. He's a Labrador at heart, but he likes to make out he's a pit bull terrier, you know. But there we go. All right.
And with that, I want to say, like, the next episode that we're coming up, our next Saturday show is going to be all about accessibility. So go and check that out if you're listening to this in the archives. And then our next interview show is going to be with Carrie Dills, coming back for a three-time guest.
The Queen of Genesis.
Yep. All right. And with that,
but first, folks, remember to get your WordPress medicine every week on WP-Tonic.
Get a spoonful of medicine and get your dose.
See you later, folks. Bye. Well, I've switched off on my recorder, John.
Bonus content time. You got something, Jonathan?
Yeah, it's just that I thought your interview with Matt on the Matt Report. How long ago was that actually, Net?
I'm guessing it's the more recent one because I did one several years ago.
Could be the reason.
Yeah, actually, I think that's the only one that I did.
Yeah, it was 7 years ago. I think you were looking like 3, 4, isn't it?
No, several. Yeah. Three or four. Was that the competitor intelligence? Getting to know your competitor.
Yeah. Did you get a lot? Yeah. I think it was a fascinating episode, and really, you should have done some more of those, really, Matt. Did you get anything from that when you did?
Well, I mean, that was very early on for me. So that was some of my first exposure to the WordPress community. And so it was really valuable for me in that sense. But the content too is quite interesting. And it's so back then, I mean, I'm still bad at SEO, like in terms of my own personal, like content marketing and all that kind of stuff. I never write as much as I should. I'm bad in general at the marketing side, although 3 years ago I was way worse. So yeah, I think it was a really good sort of look for me at the time, quite an initial look at like what somebody who's actually doing all this SEO marketing stuff really looks at.
And you said you've had some people helping you recently on the SEO. Do you mind? If you don't want to delve in it, I understand. But what are there any? Can you give any insights on the areas that they've been helping you with, which you thought needed improving?
Yeah. So 2 people helped me out. Ahmed Khalifa, who runs IgniteRock.com. IgniteRock is pretty new, but he used to do a lot of SEO work for Shoe, which is a big foot retailer, shoewear retailer in Scotland. And the other one was Rob New, who works for WP Site Care. But Rob, he's actually contributed to some of my plugins, and Ahmed's based here in Edinburgh, so we're friends from the meetup. So both of them sort of when I got the sort of staging version of my new site up for people to look at and critique, they both ran through their SEO tools and gave me loads of stuff. So Ahmed actually compiled a spreadsheet which included a list of all the broken links, a list of every single place where I was missing a meta description, anywhere there were like headings, like an H1 that jumps to an H3, or missing an H1, or places where the same H1 was used across multiple pages. And so that was quite a good technical overview of it. And I think he used Screaming Frog for that,
Yeah.
which is a service. But the really valuable stuff was kind of what they taught me about. I don't even know how to call it, but basically the principle that you should only ever target one page for a keyword, and that if you've got any other pages that are conflict or that might also be relevant to that, they can be draining from that one page. And that actually led me to really restructure how I actually set up a lot of my landing pages and my sales pages, and focus a lot more. So for instance, I used to have a page for food and drink menu, and I used to have a page for the pro version. Essentially the same. I mean, anybody searching is going to be searching for both. So I consolidated those into one. So now the pro is just an upsell that exists on the main page. I restructured a lot of my URLs to make sure that relationships between plugins were more clearly defined through the site hierarchy. So every add-on for restaurant reservations is /restaurant reservation /add-on name in the URL structure.
It sounds like you're doing a lot of work on the internal link structure, which I think is something that I've struggled with my own website, me and John, and probably got more work. But it does seem that Google really does take some notice of internal link and it being done correctly with internal link structures, doesn't it, Matt?
Yeah. Yeah, and it also, the most valuable search phrase for me is best restaurant WordPress themes. I'm nowhere near, I mean, I used to be on page 4 or 5, which is really frustrating since I'm really the only niche provider of restaurant WordPress themes, the one that focuses on it. I'm number 17, so I've gotten a big jump. But so I used to rank my homepage used to rank for that, because I had no strategy whatsoever for how to rank for different things. And so I deliberately built the things that I'm saying in my homepage to not necessarily rank for that, and really hammered home that keyword on my themes landing page. And so that's made a huge difference. So now my themes page is ranked 17, which is still useless in the world of Google. But to go from sort of page 4 or 5 up to number 17 is a big jump.
It certainly is. But it is very frustrating. You do wonder, your colleagues, is it also the external links that are coming back to you? Is that a big factor why you made a massive improvement, but you're still 17?
That's exactly what both of them said, was that your domain authority and your backlinks is just pathetic. And actually, that's part of one of my sort of drives to appear on podcasts, and is to try and help build some of those, because I just haven't done a good job.
Well, yeah, definitely get a quality backlink from us.
Good guys.
Yeah, that's something that Kai Davis talked about with us in episode 133. Was this very tactic that I see you employing Nate and a couple other people. I see making good use of it too. It's a smart move. That definitely builds up your.
And obviously, we would appreciate a post from you with a backlink to our site. Obviously,
yeah.
Well, Beanie, you're not a writer, but maybe you could move yourself in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah.
To write about your intoxicating experience on WP-Tonic. But thank you for the free SEO training. It's much appreciated.
One of the interesting things I thought, the most interesting things that they told me, how firmly they know or don't know these things, but a lot of the competitors that I'm trying to rank against that have kind of some of the top spots, they both suggested that these people were employing not necessarily black hat tricks, but not necessarily above the board tricks either. Kind of like buying up a domain with high value and stuffing it with links back to your site. And I think the world of SEO is a lot more vicious and unfriendly than it often pretends to be. It's not a world that I really want to be part of, but it's an interesting insight into, you wonder how do these websites rank sometimes. And
yep,
there's a lot, not necessarily wrong, but not necessarily. It's not as natural a ranking as it often seems.
Yeah, I think that. Sorry, John actually knows a little bit more, but I'll be interested to see if John agrees with this. I think some of those blatant techniques work short time, but I don't think they're so effective in the long term. But there's definitely still a very grey area. What you were just talking there, I would call actually semi-black hat. But I think there's still a lot of grey. But building up backlink structures that support well optimized pages takes a lot of time and effort, doesn't it, John?
Yeah, and I'll say this, like, and I'm gonna just share just a little bit, if you don't mind, like my own experiences with this. Like 3 or 4 years ago, I wasn't even in the top 100 for my local area. Now I'm ranking like #1 for WordPress development, WordPress web design, that locally. But term like Sacramento web design, I can't get up there. I'm like right where you are. I'm about like in that 15 to 17 like area, kind of floating back and forth. And Google says, oh, don't put footer links and all that. But like all the people who are in the first page, that's exactly how they're there. They don't, I mean, it's really just all footer link. There's a couple that like have like actual good backlinks from reputable sites, but the ones that are very tippy top, it's all footer links. So I did some research on this, and what I discovered is sometimes looks at the history of, say they have a #1, 2, 3 result. If that has had a good click through and a lot of, or however they measure that, bounce rate, dwell time, all those things, if all those things like match up and they say, well, this is a good enough result, like harder to displace those top spots. So my advice would just be continue doing what you're doing, continue putting out like great content, continue like trying to fish for the backlinks, appear on podcasts, put out stuff that's like shareable, linkable, and socially shareable. I would just continue to do those things, because I think eventually you will like get where you want to go. You'll get in the top 10. You'll get in the top, little spot there, because I do think that the gray hat and the black hat stuff, it does catch up with people, because I do see people now that relied on a lot of that getting penalized, and at one time they were #1, now they're like maybe #10, and they're not getting back up to where they were.
But it's fascinating.
I've seen.
Go on.
Oh, no. I was just gonna say, over the 3 or 4 years that I've kind of been looking at Google results for best WordPress restaurant themes, the top 6 or 7 are highly volatile. They're constantly shifting. People are coming in, they're getting kicked out. So there's a lot of competition going on, which is part of the reason I've sort of written off my ability to succeed. But yeah, like you say, that could be what you're saying, is that people are coming in, they're using these short-term techniques, and then they're getting penalized for it. I don't know.
Yeah. So just stay the course. You're doing the right thing. I would say like maybe like produce like more content for your own site. That would be the only thing. It sounds like you're taking care of like all the technical things, and you're doing the backlink part. So the only thing that I would say is just continue focusing on content for both the site builders and like restaurant owners, and because that stuff is shareable and linkable. They do look at like how much stuff gets socially shared, especially on Facebook, and I think to a lesser degree like Twitter and stuff like that. But they do look at social shares as a form of social proof of how relevant your site is.
Yeah, and to be honest, I find the content really hard. Like, it's been something I've perennially, every year I'm like, oh, this year I'm going to invest in it, and it's hard for me.
Well, it might be an area where you might be, if you can, afford it, that you actually find somebody that you can work with as a writer, and you outsource it to some extent. Because if it isn't your passion, and your heart isn't in it, and also you've got time restraints as well, It might be better to be more realistic. Obviously, it's highly supervise that individual work together, but it might be time to actually work out a structure of content production, which doesn't necessitate you doing it all, really, on it.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, this has been a consultation.
It's a really good bonus section, yeah.
But some areas, some areas you just got to understand it isn't your cup of tea, really, and it's never going to be. But it's really important for the business, and if you can afford, that's when it might be best to hand it over to somebody else to do it. If you know what I mean.
Yeah. I think it's hard to find a good writer in the WordPress space, but they're out there.
Yeah.
I think there are some quality individuals that can, and if it's going to be a reasonably long-term situation, I think, especially because you're a very credible business, you've been in that area for quite a while, and you've got a very high reputation. So I think quality people would want to work with you because of your reputation. What do you say, John?
Yeah, I agree. Reputation is a lot. And I think it really comes down to you can't, SEO is like a thing too, and just building like revenue. It's something where you can't do it entirely alone. You need somebody to be singing your praises, whether that's like clients, customers, or peers and allies. So the more people that you can get, kind of sending out positive vibes about your products, the better. So
I think we come to the end of the bonus content. So it's, folks, please leave us some remarks, because we now allow people to leave comments on the show notes, which we'd like people to take advantage of, won't we, John?
Yeah, definitely leave a comment. We want to hear from you. So, and hit us up on the Twitter.
Maybe you go do that. Please go. We've got the show notes. Please come on and leave some notes about what the experience was like. That would be great.
Yeah, you can do that too.
All right. So,
all right.
Let's switch this off.
All right, cool.
See you later, folks.
Bye. Peace out.